So I'm Abby, and I'm going to be presenting on the Lewis Overthrust. So just a general overview of what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to go over the geography of the region, the main structure that we can see, the stratigraphy in both the structure and the foreland basin, the different types of faulting, and then the kinematics and stresses of the region. So for general geography, the Lewis Thrust is located in northwestern Montana and it extends into Alberta, Canada. It is part of both the American Rockies and the Canadian Rockies. And then the region I'm going to be focusing on is Glacier National Park. So up here on the map, you can see, it's really hard to read. It's just the Lewis Range, which that's the region that I'll be focusing on. So then, in case anyone doesn't know what Glacier National Park is, it is 4 or 5 hours north of Missoula, and it is bordered. It's on the Canada-Montana border. And then, so here's a geologic map of Glacier National Park. Well, the whole Lewis Thrust area. The box is looking at Glacier National Park specifically. So the purple rock is our Proterozoic belt supergroup. The green and orange reddish rocks, those are our Cretaceous age, and then our blue is our anywhere from the Cambrian into the early Cretaceous. And then as you can see, we have lots of different types of thrust faults in the region, and they all just kind of have stacked on top of each other. So then here's just another geologic map where this one is actually in Glacier National Park, and it focuses just on the belt supergroup. So down here we have our pre-belt basin, which is made of the crystalline granite. We have, here's more granite up in here. The crystalline basement also contains gneisses and different types of schist. And then the white colors and the gray are the upper and lower belt supergroups. So then what is the Lewis Thrust? The Lewis Overthrust is basically a huge thrust fault that it takes up the entire northwest quadrant of Montana and part of Alberta. It is the Precambrian belt supergroup rock that has been thrust over the younger Cretaceous rock, and this was caused due to tectonic collision on the western coast as the Farallon plate started subducting underneath the North American plate, and this subduction and stress period lasted from the Jurassic to the Eocene. And the biggest stress that occurred to form the Lewis Overthrust was the Laramide orogeny, which was like 75 to 50 million years ago, Cretaceous to Paleogene. So in the diagram, you can see it started out as flat with the Cretaceous rocks being yellow, the supergroup being blue. And this is a very general diagram, but you can see it slowly starts folding, and it folds on top of each other, and then we get the mountain range here, the foreland basin, and then our blue belt supergroup is actually on top of our younger Cretaceous rocks. So then the stratigraphy of the region. So the stratigraphy of the foreland basin. The foreland basin formed 120 million years ago. It is intermontane terrain composition, and the composition of the foreland basin actually originated in California, and this Californian rock was pushed over 100 kilometers towards the east by the Lewis Thrust fault. And the foreland basin was formed, or the sediments in the foreland basin that we see now has been formed from flat ramp geometry, which is a thrust fault with a low angle. The thrust fault has a low angle. Flat ramp geometry just means it's an angle between 15 and 30 degrees. So then the different rock types that we actually see in the Lewis Overthrust, our belt supergroup is composed of marine sandstones, carbonate rocks, and then mud and siltstones. And it has been, the whole belt supergroup has been weakly metamorphosed, so our sandstones have turned into quartzites, and our carbonate rocks have turned into our limestones have turned into dolomites, and there's marble. And then our Cretaceous rocks, we have mudstone and bentonite. And bentonite is a clay mineral that absorbs a lot of water. And then our diagram just shows where the belt supergroup is in the region. So here's Wyoming down here. Up here to Idaho and Montana, and the belt supergroup extends, the covers that whole region and extends up into Canada. So the overthrust stratigraphy, again, we have our belt supergroup over our younger sedimentary rocks. All of our sedimentary rocks in the belt supergroup have undergone weak metamorphism because they were buried and because of the pressures caused by the tectonic stresses. They were weakly metamorphosed, and then we see igneous intrusions of granite and basalt down here. And based on our cross section, we can see that these rocks all through here are pre-Cambrian rock over Quaternary and Cretaceous formations, that the dikes have not been deformed, so that our dikes actually occurred after the Lewis overthrust had moved. So then the different types of faults in the region. So the main one is we have thrust faults, and there are lots of them. So the main one is the Lewis thrust, but then there's also the El Dorado thrust, the bear tooth, the bear tooth thrust, the sawtooth thrusts, and all down here we have a series of anticlines and synclines that create a big fold region, and then over here we just have a bunch of thrust faults. So here's a picture in Glacier National Park where the rock exposed up top, that is our belt supergroup. You can see the layers between the mudstone or limestones and sandstones. And then down here, where all the trees are, that would be where our Cretaceous sedimentary rocks are. So then our normal faults, which is weird that there are normal faults in a thrust region because thrusts are formed due to compressional forces, and normal faults are normally caused by extensional forces. And it just so happens that after all of the tectonic collision in the region, there was a period of tension or extension. So that period of extension that happened in the late Eocene caused east-dipping normal faults in between the Brave Dog Fault and the Lewis thrust fault. And then detachment faults. Detachment faults are a result of crustal extension and can result in large displacements of rock. So the detachment faults actually caused, I think it was like a over 7 kilometer thick part of the belt supergroup to move 100 kilometers. So, and then detachment faults are also found in regions where there are lots of normal faults, such as the Basin and Range province, and they can also be present on reactivated thrust faults that are experiencing crustal extension, which the Lewis overthrust did. And then fault duplexes, I didn't know what these were, so I had to do a lot of extra research into them. But a fault duplex is when we have our floor and roof thrusts, which are upper and lower level detachments. So here we have one thrust fault there, and another one here. So where the one detaches up top is our roof thrust, and where the second thrust attaches at the base is our floor thrust. And this is a duplex. Here's another one. It is a rock bed that has been bound by 2 thrust faults, and it's caused by overlapping thrusts. And this usually relates to, or usually happens in areas where crustal shortening is present. The next, like horses in geology, which seems weird, but a horse is a rock that has been bound between 2 thrusts. So here, this part right here we call horse. This is a horse. If there was another thrust here, we'd call that a horse. It can also just be if you have movement along the faults and you find a rock from, let's say, a Triassic rock bound in between a Jurassic and Permian layer. Because of the movement on your thrust, you would call that Triassic rock the horse in the rock. And then the stresses in the region. So stresses, the main stress is compressional stress, and it was caused by the accreted terrain due to the subduction of the Farallon plate underneath the North American plate. These stressors came from the west-southwest, and as you can see here, our snowplow in this cross-section came from the southwest and pushed northeast. So here's the reactivated Lewis thrust when the crustal extension happened. Here's the main Lewis thrust out here. So the Lewis thrust sits right in between the Foldland thrust belt and the Foreland Basin region. So our green is our Foreland Basin, our brownish, orange, and our purple rocks, or our belt supergroup, sitting on top of the Foreland Basin. just some maps. We have over here, you can see the deformed craton, which is where the Lewis thrust is located. The green on that first map is the accreted terrain that compressed that deformed craton and caused the folding thrust region. And then out here, down in our Laramide province, that is our basin and range. Our blues are accreted terrains and magmatic arcs, island arcs that's were sutured to the North American continent. Here's our folding basin, and right in between them, in that deformed craton part, we have the folding thrust belt. And the Lewis thrust is right here, or right on the border between the two, and that goes right through Glacier National Park. So you can actually see where the fold thrust belt ends and the folding basin begins. And then just some structures. There are lots of anticlines and synclines, and I chose the Akamina syncline because it is in Glacier National Park. It is a shallow dipping syncline, and then again you can see the Paleozoic rocks, and then where Proterozoic supergroup, which forms the actual syncline rock. And then the shortening versus the extension in the region. So from the Jurassic to the early Eocene, when we had all the terrain accreting to the continent, we saw crustal shortening, which was our thrusts piling up on top of each other, causing mountain belts. And from our middle to late Eocene into our Holocene extension, so when we saw that, so that was, it's believed that it's part of the Farallon plate that broke off, so now we have the one Fuca plate. And so this broken off piece of the Farallon plate is actually stretching apart the region and thinning the crust. They believe the same thing is happening down in New Mexico in the Basin Range province. So the Laramide orogeny then caused the shortening and the buildup of the mountains in the region, and ultimately led to the fold thrust region. And then, so just in conclusion, the Lewis Overthrust is a big thrust belt that carried our Precambrian belt supergroup on top of our Cretaceous rocks. It led to an area in northwestern Montana and Canada that is very deformed, has lots of faults that piled on top of each other. It's a very hard region to study because of this, and because of the shortening versus extension, it's hard to tell when did the fault last move, is it still active, and so on. Here are my references. Any questions?
Why did you choose this region?
So I really like Montana. In general, I go out there every year, and then I chose to focus in the Glacier National Park region just because it's, based on like the first picture in this one, to me, it's one of